introduced that and began to talk more about the fall of the firstborn and introduced the Levitical priesthood in part 2. And now in part 3, we'll talk more about the goings on of the firstborn and so forth and so on. So what's the difference between the Levitical priesthood and the firstborn? Well, remember, we talked about the definition of the Levitical priesthood, and that was in the scriptures there when Yah took those people to be his own, just as he had the firstborn. And he said they were in service in the temple or in the tabernacle. That was their job. They were responsible for set up and take down and all of the aspects of that. Was that done on the Sabbath? Absolutely not. But they did sacrifices on the Sabbath. Why wouldn't they? They offered burnt offerings to the Father all the time, and significantly more on those days that are set apart, the special days, the holy days, the days that are clearly spelled out in the Torah. So let's talk about the firstborn. What were their responsibilities? Exodus 18, verses 20 through 22. And you shall teach them ordinances and laws, and shall show them the way wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. Moreover, you will provide out of all the people able men, such as that fear God, fear Yah, fear me, men of truth, hating covetousness. Remember, they had just come out of Egypt. These are people who were in captivity in Egypt, who had lost their walk, who had lost their way for the most part, who really had just piled on the traditions and the way the things were done in their new environment, just like we all do. We all live and work and play the same sort of way because that's the society we live in, and that's different from country to country. So Moses was told by Yah to teach the leaders what they had forgotten, the things that they had been responsible for since creation, but had forgotten about those things. To teach the ordinances and the laws. To who? To everybody. To their families. And they were to walk in those ways. And they worked in the Torah. They worked. The Torah is a working relationship. It's a way that we interact on a daily basis. It's just like the laws that we have in our country, laws pertaining to driving, to interacting with each other, to going down the road, to going to a grocery store, to all these different things. There are laws and rules that are set up, and we're supposed to abide by them, and those change from time to time. But the laws of the Torah, they don't change. They're the same. They're always the same. And we're expected to uphold those things in a Torah-based environment all the time. But we're not in a Torah-based environment, so there are a lot of those things that don't apply to us. And that's why people say they're done away with. Well, they're not done away with. They're still there. We just don't have those implemented in our lives because they're not important. One that's a very interesting one, if you drive down the road in the country, you'll see these stones that are out on the corners of people's properties. And there is Torah law about not moving those stones. Well, those stones still exist. So if I move those stones, if I move a stone that is a marker for my property line, I'm in violation of Torah. It's a physical and a spiritual law, and some of it applies. Is that also a law in our country? Certainly. Is that also a law in other countries? Certainly. But where did they get that? They got that from the Torah. It's been around forever. As long as people have been putting markers down for land, that law has existed. Responsibilities of the Levitical priesthood, I kind of went over those, but it's Numbers 18 again, and those are serving in the temple. Those are the people who are responsible for, quote unquote, doing the dirty work that's involved in the temple. This was their life, their passion, and their job, period. People say, well, how did they eat? They ate from the sacrifices. People gave fellowship offerings. If I had an issue with a neighbor and I cleaned that up, we might go to the temple and offer a fellowship offering. And then the two of us would sit down, and maybe even our families, and we would enjoy a roasted cow or a roasted lamb or something like that. And whatever that went with it. Some of our first fruits, some of our second fruits, some of the fruits from our gardens. Yes, absolutely. And who else was able to enjoy that? The Levitical priesthood. They didn't overindulge themselves, but they were certainly allowed to partake of the meal as well. Why not? They were hardly ever away from the temple when they were working. And when they were off, can you imagine how tired they were? How much they didn't want to see anything? Remember, the Levitical priesthood, they lived right there close by to the temple. The land that they had was not used for growing anything necessarily. They didn't get a lot of land. They got a land that they were allowed to sleep on and live on. So when they ate at the temple, and they ate good. You have to believe they ate good. So this would be the true meaning of priest. That's in the definitions H3547 and H3548. One who undertakes anyone's cause, stands up in anyone's matters, and labors in his cause. Labors in his cause. Who were the ones who prepared the sacrifice? Who were the ones that did the actual killing? The priests. The Levitical priesthood did all of these things. They were responsible for standing up, for undertaking to help fulfill the responsibility of the person who brought this sacrifice or offering to them. So they had to know what they were doing. We can definitely see from the work of the Levitical priests that they did labor in everyone else's cause. They did. That was their job. That was their way of life. And like it or not, that's what they did. And that was it. They didn't teach the walk to anybody. They were responsible for doing the things in the temple that were pertaining to the temple. Could they share those things outside? Absolutely. But it wasn't so that other people would learn how to do it so they could do it, because you had to be of that priesthood. You had to be one of those people. So what happened? Was the golden calf incident separated? What happened was the golden calf incident separated the people, the firstborn, all of his firstborn, the people he had sanctified and set apart, from Yah, and caused Yah to switch gears. He set apart another group of people and gave them the job of working in the temple. Think about it. Were the firstborn going to also work in the temple? Well, we don't know. We don't have anything to go on except what we have. And what we have is that a new group of people were given that responsibility. So did the firstborn lose their duties? No. They still needed to teach and educate their families about the truth and the walk. They were still leaders of 10, 100, 1,000, 50. They were still leaders of those people. Judges, they were still those people. Everyone wants to separate the man from the woman in this matter, or the firstborn from the Levitical priesthood in this matter. This would not be the case. Remember, a family unit with the husband and wife at the top. They both educated and taught their children. They both attempted to walk uprightly. Abraham and Sarah both taught their children. Isaac and Rebekah both taught their children. Leah taught her children. Jacob and his wives taught their children. Everybody taught their children the truth. and the walk, the way to walk. There are examples in the Word of women judges. How could they be a judge? Well, they knew the Torah correctly and they lived uprightly. There's no law against that. In fact, we're all admonished to live by the Torah uprightly. Exodus 15:20, Miriam was a prophetess. People want to say, well, she's just a dance leader. I'm sorry. I don't believe that. I don't agree. When there were get-togethers with Moses and Aaron, Miriam was there. Why? Because she lived uprightly too. She was responsible as well. Was she leading men? Not necessarily, but she was leading women. Think about it. If I want to counsel a family member who's a female, would it not also be important for there to be a female there with me, like my wife? Yes, absolutely. We together are a team. We are one, and together we would go if I needed to be there. If I didn't need to be there, my wife could certainly take care of it. Can she lay hands on? Absolutely. Can she pray for someone by laying hands on them and asking for the Father to do something or offering something to that person? Absolutely. It's in her job description. Leviticus 9, and it came to pass on the 8th day that Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. Elders, H2205, Zakan, old, gray-haired, leaders of the tribe. So we have instances where it was necessary to call upon the firstborn, to call upon the leaders within the nation who were not the Levitical priesthood. Why would the elders be called if the priests were in charge? Because the leaders of the tribes were still educating the people. They were still responsible for the education of the people. They didn't lose their authority. They just didn't gain any new responsibilities. The elders were called together to be with Aaron and his sons as well as Moses when Yah wanted to share something with them. When Yah wanted to make sure direction was given to the rest of the people. Why not? Because these are the people who were leading, who were guiding, who were educating the whole nation. The firstborn, the elders. Were these elders laid hands upon and made elders? No. Their walk made them elders. Their living uprightly into their older years made them elders. I'm an elder in my family. I've been on this walk for 48, almost 48 years. Obviously, I do not know as much as people who are as other people, period. But because of my longevity in this walk, I would be an elder. I would be someone that people could come to and ask questions of. Have I been ordained to this? Absolutely not. No human being can give me something that the Father gives. The Father gives us long life. The Father gives us understanding. The Father gives us ability to live uprightly. And the Father gives us direction. So, old, gray-haired, sure. I don't have gray hair on my head. I have gray hair on my chin. So if I had a beard, I would be gray-haired. But I choose not to do that. So one more quick note about the laying on of hands. I know I brought that up about my wife. Numbers 27, verses 18 through 20 in the King James Version. And Yahweh said unto Moses, Take you Joshua the son of Nun, and a man of whom is in the Spirit, and lay hands upon him. Lay your hands upon him, Moses, Set him before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation, and give him a charge in their sight. And ye shall put some of your honor upon him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient to that. Did you notice? Yah told Moses to put his hands on Joshua, not the priest. Why? Well, Moses was transferring power, authority, and responsibility to Joseph. It says, give him a charge in their sight. Verse 19. What was the priest going to do? Nothing. Remember, Eleazar was a Levitical priest. He was just an observer. His responsibilities lay in the temple, not outside the temple. There are many examples in Torah of elders being called. Many examples of people being used by the Father outside of the Levitical priesthood. Who were those people? Those people were leaders because they were servants. Moses laid hands on Joshua to transfer some of his authority to Joshua. Why? Well, Moses was going to be dying. And this was in response to the need for the people to see someone else stepping up into the gap. There are a lot of examples where, like I said before, where not only Moses and Aaron and Levitical priesthood were called by the Father to do things, but the elders in the nation were also called. Numbers 11 is one place, and Deuteronomy 29 is another. This is a short list. There are lots of other places, because we need to realize the importance of the firstborn. The firstborn is very important to the Father in their work with people. And I've begun to divide this, as you can see, between the priesthood of the Levites and the priesthood of Melchizedek, or the firstborn. Many people call it the firstborn, and why would I not call it the firstborn? And as we draw near the end of part 3 and we get into part 4, in part 4 I'll put some more information in there so you'll more clearly understand what a firstborn is, as we've talked about who the firstborn are and what their responsibilities are. And we've compared that to the Levitical priesthood. But there are significant scriptures that speak to the importance of the firstborn. Exodus 13, verse 13, in the King James Version. And every firstling of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb. And if you will not redeem it, then you shall break its neck. And all the firstborn of man among your children shall you redeem. Everything, Numbers 18, verse 15, everything that opens the matrix in all flesh, which they bring unto Yahweh, whether it be of men or beasts, shall be Yahweh's. Nevertheless, the firstborn of man shall you surely redeem, and the firstling of unclean beasts shall you redeem. People want to argue that this is only found in the Torah or the Old Covenant. But it's not just in the Old Covenant. And as we get to this ending, we'll see what this really means. So let's go to the new part of the Word and get our answer. Revelation 14, 1 through 5, in the King James. And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they sung, as it were, a new song before the throne, and before the four beasts and the elders. And no man could learn that song but the 144,000, which were redeemed from the earth. These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto Yah and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before the throne of Yah. Who are the 144,000? Well, they're redeemed. We talked about who gets redeemed in the Old Testament, in the first part of the book, in the Torah. That's the firstborn. These people were redeemed from among men. What does it mean to be redeemed? Redeemed is paid for with a price. We have examples of that. 1 Peter 1, 18 through 19. For as much as you know that you were not redeemed with corruptible things, as silver and gold, from your vain conversation received by tradition from your fathers, verse 19, but with the precious blood of Yeshua, as a lamb without blemish and without spot. People will say that those redeemed are not just firstborn. I don't disagree with that. Those who will be redeemed must take hold of the charge that's spoken in Exodus 18, 20 through 22. But again, in the old part of the book, in the Torah, the firstborn were redeemed with a real lamb. And it was probably a firstborn lamb without spot or blemish. But in the spirit, the firstborn are redeemed with the blood of Yeshua. And I said firstborn, and I'll define firstborn here pretty soon. But let's read Exodus 18, 20 through 22 again, just so we know what the responsibility is for those who wish to be members of the firstborn. You shall teach them ordinances and laws. You shall show them the way wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. Moreover, they will be able men, and women, such that fear Yah, men of truth, hating covetousness, happy with what they have, thankful for the blessings, and able to educate. That's the firstborn. That's people who wish to be firstborn. There will always be places that people go in Scripture to point out that here it says this, or here it says that, and those places contradict what I'm saying. I say everyone can always find a reason for not agreeing with something. It doesn't mean that what I'm saying is incorrect. It means that you've chosen not to accept what I've said, and you're dealing with that issue by finding scriptures that actually contradict what I say. I tell you, you can find a scripture that will contradict just about anything if you look for it. Does that make it right? No. So as we finish up here in part 3, we've really come a long way as we've put together some more ideas about how important the firstborn are to our Heavenly Father, and that Yeshua came to redeem them spiritually. Remember, we're all in captivity. None of us are living in Torah-based society. None of us are living correctly under the law, under Torah. And therefore, we require someone, something to redeem us. It can't continue to redeem us. It can only redeem us once. We have to do our best to walk uprightly until then, knowing that we have stumbled and that we will require the blood of Yeshua in order to receive total forgiveness and the gifts that have yet to come up our way. So we'll end part 3 now, and then we'll pick up right about here for part 4 and close this all up, wrap it all together, and give you something to take home with you also that you can do some additional studying on. That's just the way I am. God bless.